On the day I found out Chu Ky's ex-girlfriend was diagnosed with cancer, we had planned to go on a trip to celebrate our first wedding anniversary. I was packing and turned to ask Chu Ky if he wanted to bring the dark blue tie with him. But he stood frozen, staring at his phone, seemingly lost to the world. Chu Ky? I called again, and he seemed to awaken from a dream, looking up at me. To do. I was startled. What's the matter? To do is dying. After saying that, he didn't look at me again and ran out the door. He ran so fast, as if a second's delay would mean he'd never see her again. When I followed him to the hospital, Chu Ky had already found To-Do's room. He silently read her diagnosis report, then after a moment, asked, "Since when?" To-Do lay on the hospital bed, curled up in a blanket, her face almost transparent and ashen. "Last month, I found out during a health check. The doctor said it was too late for a cure." Before she could finish, she saw me standing at the door and burst into tears. "I'm sorry, Sister on two, I didn't mean to disturb your marriage, but I'm so scared. I'm only 24, I don't want to die." Chu Ky turned, following her gaze to see me. His expression suddenly turned unpleasant, and his eyes were reproachful. "What are you doing here?" At such a moment, bringing up our anniversary trip for the honeymoon with Miss seemed far too trivial. So I lowered my eyes and tried to comfort To-Do. "I came to see if there's anything you need my help with." "No need." Even before To-Do could reply, Chu Ky spoke firmly, "You can go home." Before leaving, I don't know what possessed me, but I glanced back. Chu Ky was holding To-Do close, hugging her tightly. Her face rested on his shoulder, eyes closed, but tears flowed endlessly. "I'm only yours," she whimpered, her voice fragile. "Chu Ky, I have nothing left, just you." Hearing this, Chu Ky's embrace tightened, his voice pained. "I know." It seemed that between them there had always been an understanding and closeness that had never been broken. I watched this scene in surprise, emotions crashing over me like endless waves, but ultimately leaving me paralyzed. In the face of death, those living healthily bear any emotions cluelessly. Chu Ky and I were childhood sweethearts, and we fell in love when we were 16. But afterward, my family went through some changes, leaving me no choice but to study abroad. Not knowing how long I'd be gone, I reluctantly ended things with Chu Ky. He was very angry, saying it was because I didn't trust him enough to try long distance. But on the day I left, he still saw me off at the airport. With reddened eyes, he said, "Atu, I'll wait for you to return. No matter how long, I'll wait." Because of those words. Through the hardest times, I endured, managing to finish a course in 3 years that should have taken 5. But when I returned, Chu Ky had a new girlfriend. A petite but beautiful girl named To-Do, a junior at his school. People said she had pursued him for a long time, caring for him for 2 years without asking for anything in return, before he reluctantly agreed. After returning, our childhood friends organized a get-together, and someone mentioned To-Do. In any case, she gives herself away for free. Wherever Brother Ky goes, she follows. If we go out for drinks, she sobers him up in the wind. If he's sick, she makes porridge to take care of him. I hear she wanted to tag along today too. Chu Ky rubbed his temples, clearly in a bad mood. "Don't mention her." Right, I forgot On two is back, so Brother Ky should set boundaries with her." I instinctively glanced at Chu Ky, but he didn't look at me. He was staring intently at his phone screen, his face heavy. That get-together wasn't very pleasant. Afterward, Chu Ky asked if I needed a ride home, but seeing his barely concealed anxiety, I guessed he didn't truly want to. So I said, "No need, I didn't drink, I can drive myself." He sighed in relief and drove off. I later learned that day was To-Do's birthday. She was sitting at the highest car of a Ferris wheel, sending a picture of herself holding a cake, smiling with forced cheer. Chu Ky sped like mad and finally reached her side before midnight. Returning home, half-packed luggage still lay in the bedroom. I neatly folded each piece of clothing, my hand stopping when I picked up a toiletry bag. Inside was an old electric shaver, brightly blue, not the type Chu Ky would buy for himself. No need to ask who gifted it. I stared at it a bit before putting it into his drawer. It was late when Chu Ky returned. His eyes were bloodshot, the corners red, his expression dazed and somewhat lost. I approached him. "I've cancelled our flight and hotel." He murmured, "Okay. We'll tell your parents this weekend we can't buy the things they wanted this time. Next time we go abroad, we'll get more." I was just calmly discussing how to handle our abruptly halted trip. But suddenly, Chu Ky grew angry. His eyes drilled into me, his tone impatient. "There's no need to tell me about minor things like this. Can't you handle it yourself?" I was stunned for a moment. For some reason, I recalled when we first started dating. Back then, we were in 11th grade, attending the same school but different classes. I was troubled by some girls, so I contacted their parents, leading them to resentfully lock me in the storage room after school. Since childhood, I was used to solving things on my own, so I didn't tell Chu Ky. But he still scared those girls away and then glared at me angrily. "Why didn't you tell me when you faced trouble? I could handle it myself." "But I am your boyfriend." Back then, Chu Ky was still a pure teenager. After saying that, he stormed off, but for half a month afterward, he sat in on my evening self-study. He slowly, patiently changed my mindset, making me instinctively want to confide in him, tell him my plans. But now he tells me, "You shouldn't bother me with these minor things, can't you handle them yourself?" As if aware he lost control, Chu Ky paused, speaking more mildly. "Sorry, A2, I'm feeling a bit vexed." I took a deep breath. "I'm going to shower." When I emerged, Chu Ky was nowhere to be found. I searched until I found him on the balcony, chain-smoking. Chu Ky was not a smoker. Previously, after a big fight with To-Do, not long after they broke up, he proposed to me. That day, To-Do was there, watching him propose to me, her face pale, tears streaming, and Chu Ky saw but said nothing. That night, waking in the middle of the night, I found him smoking on the balcony, gazing at the night towards the north, where stars flickered. That direction was the highest Ferris wheel in the city. Like before, I said nothing, quietly returning to bed. Maybe it was the wind. I woke with a splitting headache the next day. I've always suffered migraines. Searching for painkillers, Chu Ky suddenly emerged from the bathroom, his face dark. His tone was furious. "Where's my shaver?" Temple throbbing with pain, before I could speak, Chu Ky gripped my wrist tightly. "On two, where's my shaver?" He asked again, with such force that I hissed in pain. "In the nightstand drawer." Without another word, Chu Ky turned to retrieve the shaver To-Do gave him. Rubbing my swelling wrist, I swallowed 2 painkillers. The unexpected illness of To-Do completely occupied Chu Ky's mind. He had no time for my migraines. Of course. They were just trivial maladies, ultimately unworthy of his attention. For several days, Chu Ky didn't go to work. He contacted specialists, seeking leading cancer experts in the city. But all their conclusions were the same. To-Do's cancer was terminal, treatments would only prolong her pain. With each confirmation, Chu Ky's face grew increasingly troubled. At dusk, driving back from work, I saw Chu Ky and To-Do in the yard. Compared to the last meeting, she was thinner, sitting on the swing wearing a vibrant red sundress rather than the striped hospital gown. The sun bathed the city in warmth and light, adding color to her bloodless complexion. My husband, Chu Ky, knelt before her, carefully applying lipstick to her pale lips. Inside my car, I watched silently. At that moment, an uncontrollable thought surfaced. Perhaps the greatest regret of Chu Ky's life was marrying me. Staying at a nearby bar until midnight, it seemed Chu Ky finally remembered his forgotten wife and called. "A2, where are you?" Before I could answer, music from a band on the stage resonated, breaking the call. Chu Ky paused. "I'll come get you." When he arrived, the band was finishing their set and leaving. Sitting in a corner, an untouched mojito sat on the table before me. Under flashing lights, Chu Ky stood coldly distant, hard to approach. "Why are you here alone drinking?" "I'm not," I said. "I just came for the music, didn't even sip my drink." Hearing this, Chu Ky seemed relieved. He took my hand. Let's head home. In the car, the strong scent of antiseptic greeted me. No doubt, he had returned to do to the hospital before finally remembering me. I asked, "How is to do?" In truth, since finding out about her illness, Chu Ky and I remained in tacit silence on the topic. It was the first time I'd broached it. He couldn't avoid it any longer. Not good. "I've arranged for the best doctor, but things aren't optimistic." Seeming to realize his words were inadequate, he added, "Don't misunderstand, too. He's just trying to make amends for not treating her well before." This was true. I'd heard from friends that Chu Ky hadn't been kind to do. Half a year after I left, he'd met her. She felt grateful for his help, and this gratitude morphed into the fervent love of a young girl. Despite his coldness and derision over 2 years, her fervor persevered. Finally, he relented. But even then, their relationship required more effort from her. Sighing, I exhaled. "Besides, she's dying." Speaking those words, tears choked his voice. Similar situations, the helplessness and guilt of a healthy person against invincible illness, I'd endured. That's why I felt so powerless now. Though Chu Ky was my husband. Though I was his legal wife. The rest of the drive was silent. Upon arriving home, strolling through the garden, I paused naturally by the swing. Chu Ky turned to me. "What's wrong?" Shaking my head, I whispered, "Nothing." It was simply an eyesore. When I mentioned visiting to do in the hospital to Chu Ky, his first reaction was an intense, wary gaze. I pretended not to notice. "Is it all right?" After a few seconds, Chu Ky agreed, "All right." Perhaps recent treatment had positive results. Her complexion was better. After some light conversation, she mentioned returning to work. "I know there's no cure, but for these remaining days, I want to live normally, work." She looked expectantly at Chu Ky. Naturally, how could he refuse? Chu Ky proposed arranging work for her at his company, but she shook her head adamantly. "No, that'd be favoritism. I want a job based on my abilities." True to form, Chu Ky sought me out. "I'll pay her. You don't need to give her work. It won't affect you." Unable to resist an ironic smirk, I quipped, "Chu Ky, what do you take me for?" He seemed briefly stunned. Finally, he sighed, "But she's ill." Indeed, she was ill, with cancer, close to death. Thus, whatever she desired, healthy people like us had to unconditionally comply. After a while, I passed him a business card, my tone detached, "Have her send her resume to human resources, they'll follow normal procedures." In the end, Chu Ky didn't take the card. His eyes bore into me with icy reproach, almost as if we were strangers. "On to, your petty conduct towards a dying person frightens me." Long after he left, I stood meaninglessly, striving to uphold the last vestiges of my dignity. Until a girl approached, tapping my shoulder, quietly pointing out a stain on my dress. Gratefully, I thanked her for the reminder. I'd awoken with back pain, and my period had unexpectedly arrived in the hospital hallway. With Chu Ky entirely focused on to-do, he hadn't noticed when I slipped away to buy pads at a convenience store, or ducked into the restroom. Many years ago, during my first period, I was an embarrassed mess at school. Chu Ky had bought pads for me, tying his jacket around my waist. But that was a 14-year-old Chu Ky. I instructed my assistant to investigate to-do. It confirmed my assumptions. She had a tragic past, orphaned, poor. Chu Ky was her sole light. Without his help, she couldn't afford treatment. So I sent money to her from family. Denying her employment at my company was a necessary boundary to protect my marriage. Giving her the money evoked a shared humanity, a bit of compassion from me. But I underestimated Chu Ky's vigilance. That night as I returned home, when I flicked on the light, there he stood, silently, piercingly watching from the doorway. Surprised, I asked, "You're home early?" Steele answered, as a bank card struck my face, grazing my eye. Pain diffused from my temple, swiftly radiating through my body. Suddenly, Chu Ky gripped my wrist in fury. What more do you want after we married? Why humiliate a dying person with money? I didn't. On 2, you were raised in wealth, educated in the best overseas schools, returned to your family's company. I broke things off to propose, everything's gone smoothly. You lack nothing, yet she has nothing. Does demeaning her exalt you further? I closed my eyes. Memories flickered, an old movie reel whirring in my mind. Chu Ky? I steadied my voice into calm, barring a tremor. You can't speak to me like that. He released me then, perhaps to say something more. But just then his phone rang. Picking it up, the screen flashed to Du's name. His expression altered. Ignoring me, he slipped past, out the door. I gazed at the painting on the wall, pressing my side gently. Exquisite pain rose anew. For several days after, Chu Ky didn't return home. He didn't contact me, but I knew as Du's condition worsened. In agony, she had called for him. The Chu Ky who once stood to protect me through anything, now went unhesitantly to her. I quietly chose a distant hospital for a checkup. When the doctor gravely reviewed my report, he advised, "Miss On, try venting your emotions, it will help stabilize your health." Silent for a long time, I finally responded, "Thank you, but there's no one I can talk to. Is there anyone left for me to rely on?" During my 3 years abroad, at my worst, I collapsed from gastric bleeding, rushed to the hospital by a stranger. After discharge, walking a desolate street, I was caught in a shooting, a stray bullet grazing my side. I've grown accustomed to solitude. After all, Chu Ky and I were estranged then. Returning, he had to do by his side. I couldn't speak then. Agreeing to Chu Ky's proposal had been partly selfish. Because, in desperate dark nights, I recalled the boy at the airport with eyes wet, vowing to wait for my return, and mustered strength. Remembering the past, I aimlessly exited the hospital. Suddenly, someone blocked my path. Looking up, it was Chu Ky. Piercingly focused, fear mingled with his cold gaze. "Atu, why are you at the hospital?" Dazed, I returned to awareness. Perhaps he feared I was like to do. So, I laughed, just a routine checkup. He remained unconvinced, leaving me no choice but to hand over the report. I withheld the psychological evaluation. Nothing notable arose from the physical. Scrutinizing the report twice, Chu Ky fixated on old injury in the waist area, asking, "What's this? Why haven't I heard?" I hesitated slightly. "Oh, I got caught in a shootout abroad, just small scratches." In the car, Chu Ky's icy gaze seemed capable of frigidly freezing the whole lane. Resignedly, I turned to the moving scenery beyond, before deciding on an additional couple words. "Rest assured, I'm aware of my condition, getting checked yearly. I won't turn out like to." "Why didn't you call me?" Abruptly cutting me off, he braked hard, pulling over to sharply lean in. I knew he referred to today's general checkup. So I calmly looked back, just a routine screen. Isn't Du's condition unstable lately? Mention of Du wove convoluted emotions through his eyes. Envy, anger. Ultimately, though, his focus returned to me, though his tone wavered uncertainly now. "Surely you'd have told me before about such serious wounds." I genuinely laughed. "When I was injured, I paused briefly. Wasn't that when you were finally moved by Du's pursuit, agreeing to date her?" "Chu Ky, recovering from surgery, in the hospital, I saw your Weibo post." Afterward, Chu Ky was inexplicably more attentive to me. Beyond greater physical intimacy, his car appeared daily below my office. In an instant, it was as if we were 18 again. Back then, except for burning affection, there was nothing between us. Multiple judgments, considerations internally settled me before speaking. "Truly, you don't need to feel guilty, you couldn't have done anything, we were an ocean apart." The smile fainted, vanishing from Chu Ky's lips. Drawing a deep breath, "I'm not compensating you, on 2, you're my wife, married over a year, this is normal." I had no reply before his car phone illuminated. A message from Du. Yet inexplicably, Chu Ky disregarded it. I inquired, "How is to do?" He sneered coldly, "What's that to me? Many wish to care for her, she doesn't lack me." I think if he had glanced at the mirror, Chu Ky would have seen the jealousy burning in his reflection. I soon discovered why. By month's end, while visiting family, I learned they were in the same hospital as to do. Passing her room, I glimpsed her thin frame sitting up, repeatedly calling a number with frail fingers. A boy in black with a cap stood beside her bed. Momentarily meeting my gaze, his eyes darkened, but he spoke tenderly to her. "Stop calling, of course he needs to be with his wife. Do, you still have me." Ignoring him, she repeatedly dialed Chu Ky, crying as if her tears never emptied, pleading brokenly, "Don't ignore me, Chu Ky, you promised to stay with me till the end." I admit, in that moment, I envied her. My life mapped on a fixed trajectory, endlessly advancing. My path held no choices. Back home, I found dinner prepared. Casually mentioning, "I saw to do today. She's gotten so thin." His gaze bore into me, sharp and serious in a flash. "Why did you meet her?" His stare like a blade cut me out of my reveries. Dryly I retorted, "Relax. I didn't cause trouble. Just visited someone else." "I didn't mean that." Raking his eyes from mine, Chu Ky's attention fell. Perhaps out of amends, the next month, he offered a birthday getaway. Watch midnight movies, 2 films, then see the sunrise by the coast. I intended to refuse. But his earnest plans mirrored a 16th birthday yen we had. Then, I could barely breathe under suffocating pressure. Though knowing nothing, instinctively, Chu Ky sensed my unrest, whisking me away at midnight. Together, we watched 2 films, First Love and Roman Holiday. After, when dawn sparkled golden across the horizon, parked oceanside, he confessed. A lifetime ago. Long enough he plans to revive it again to resurrect lost fragments of memory. So I agreed. I said yes. Just as that 16th eve. Though it was the same movie, the magic was missing. Much like my time with Chu Ky, I dwell on past ruminations. Understanding their significance, today, he couldn't balance love against my disillusionment. Stubborn, clinging to faded echoes from years past, nights he'd hold me back from the abyss. Feeding my awareness of this dismal issue, my attention gravitates solely to Chu Ky. Yet, inattentive, he grew anxious. Occasionally glancing at his phone with pained perplexion before hastily pocketing it. Finally, I reminded, "Your phone vibrated, someone's calling." Grimacing, Chu Ky shook his head, "Don't mind her. I'm here for your birthday." How pitiful, when I earnestly believed him. At session's end, Chu Ky calmly took to do's 28th call, her desolate cries echoing, "Chu Ky, being sick is really tough. I've coughed so much blood today, am I dying, Chu Ky?" Under my unwavering eyes, he coolly pocketed the phone, brushing his lips against my cheek, "I need the restroom." He didn't return. I waited long. Secluded near the ocean, waiting at the theater, myriad thoughts ran through my mind, culminating in a decision to call him. But his phone was off. Hanging up, a WeChat friend request popped up from To Do. Accepting it, her messages quickly streamed in. "Sorry, on 2, I know today is your birthday. I just wanted to prove my importance to him. You are the moonlight in Chu Ky's life, no matter how kind I am, I can't sway what you mean to him. But I'm sick, near death. Let me be selfish, to become a bad woman once. Moonlight. Moonlight." The words grated on me. Fury surged, but before I could calm myself, a forceful hand dragged me roughly into a narrow alley. In a dress, I fell, knees and elbows skidding painfully across the rough ground. Raising my head, a murderous pair of dark eyes met mine. Familiar yet foreign. The boy in black by To Do's bedside days ago. The wife of Chu Ky, huh? Who do you think you are to upset Do? Enduring endless pain from cancer each day while you remain a princess, what for? Snatch away her love, ruin her last days. Pulling down his cap, his merciless eyes offered chilling intent, keep her awake, the harder the better. On the horizon, light dawned. The sun was near risen. And behind him, a burly man approached, towering ominously over me. Dust scattered. Why did everyone pity to do? Empty-handed, yet I. Fading fragments of memory starkly lit within my mind. Now clear beyond ever before. When I was 6, my mother was terminal with breast cancer. Even removing her breast, they'd said, wouldn't halt spreading cancer cells. Bedridden, my mother's life faint and diminishing, someone arrived to visit. My aunt, mother's identical twin. Casually replacing my mother, to claim what should have stayed hers. My father didn't object, knowing our families tied inevitably together. At 6, I vaguely understood why I called her mom, or how she birthed my half-sister within a month. On my mother's deathbed, she used her last strength to clasp my hand, saying, "My dear child, survive, live healthily." Such sentiments became shackles on my future self. Every instance to do declared she didn't want to die birthed bizarre feelings. Desirous of life and loved, she contracted a fatal illness. Yet me, desiring to vanish, continued living in ignominy. In my childhood home, countless restrictions smothered me, assuming my eldest daughter's burdens for the On family. Meanwhile, my sister lived free, whimsically beloved. Learning of my relationship with Chu Ky, father urged aunt to intervene. Wearing mother's chipao and favorite pearl necklace, she coolly eyed me with derision. Romance is allowed, but don't lose your virginity, it's worthless in that case. On 2, you're the eldest, you'd not wish your sister to carry undue burdens, correct? At 20, aunt presented 2 options. Marry the groomed, influential partner 20 years older deemed settled by my father. Or study business abroad, marry post-graduation, returning to dutifully support the family enterprise. I chose the second. Recently back, pressure mounted to consider marriage plans beneficial to the On family. Practically rationalizing every decision, careful and comprehensive. They alone never consulted me. Fortunately, Chu Ky proposed about that time. I accepted his proposal, naively believing he could steady me from those precipices, vigilant to catch me as I teetered. But by then, to do stood at his side. At last, finding my torn gown abandoned on the ground, I reached desperate fingers for the heel abandoned beside me. Standing at length, I fiercely plunged the heel down. Warm blood sprayed across my face as the man's body crumpled gradually. Clutching the stained heel, I leaned against the wall, gradually rising. Roughly approached, the boy faced me on hearing the disturbance. His gaze deepened. "You've got some spine." Breathing heavily, I raised my head. "Your beloved to-do betrayed me first. No matter how fondly you think of her, in her heart there's only Chu Ky. Even as his married, even dying, she cares naught for you." "Shut it!" he charged, slapping me viciously. If you hadn't accepted his proposal, they'd have mended and lived happily. My cheek stung, but inwardly I remained poised, irately laughing. Why shouldn't I have accepted his proposal? Were to do to ask you to wed, would you refuse? She's dying, beyond anything you can cure. Unable to aid her, redirecting anger at innocent me. Stopping briefly, I whispered, "Pathetic coward. Desperate enough, die alongside her." An echo of the doctor's firm, precise counsel resurrected within me. "Miss On, try venting your emotions, it will help stabilize your health." The truth confirmed itself. For some time, the boy wordlessly assessed me before an anguished wail escaped. He slumped to the ground, curling into tears. Pitiful as his sorrow seemed. I simply watched, indifferent. They all perceived themselves as most woeful under heaven. To do, Chu Ky, him, all similar. Lingering, remaking my defaced dress, I departed the alley into broadening dawn. Little by little, moonlight chased shadows scattering across the heavens. A breathtaking arrival. Whether or not Chu Ky stands beside me, ultimately, it doesn't affect my view. Hailing a cab to the police station, I handed the weaponized heel to an officer, querying if it justified self-defense. The young officer, kind and empathetic, offered solace. Miss On, rest assured. Your visible injuries prove it was attempted assault. But are you all right? I affirmed, acknowledging body aches, though nothing I couldn't manage. Shall we contact family to pick you up? But who would I call? Eyes down, I grinned ruefully. Not necessary, my family is quite busy living their own affairs. Completing my statement, returning home I signed the divorce papers prepared, mailing them to Chu Ky's company. Throughout the process, Chu Ky hadn't contacted me once. Yet from To-Do's Moments page, I saw he'd traveled with her to Yunnan. For reasons parroted time and again. She was dying. Her wish. By Tsangshan Hai, they'd spent days swinging lakeside, billowing vibrant skirts in the breeze. At her request, Chu Ky, bury my ashes here when I die, I want to be a free spirit. If you think of me, visit here sometimes. Such romance. Even at death, she orchestrated with unforgettable dramatic exuberance, guaranteeing Chu Ky's lifelong remembrance of her. Dispassionately, I chuckled, unfriending her. Indeed, I could perceive Chu Ky's mindset, avoiding me, traversing her final road in silent deceit to return, as if normalcy could resume. Impossible. Before leaving the city, I met an acquaintance. Mutual friend to Chu Ky and me, Yuan. I possessed few friends, noticeably among them. I'm leaving. He gestured with the cigarette, startled. No way, do you have cancer too? Scoffing, I assured him, ridiculous, I'm just relocating. What about the On Corporation and assets? Let it go. Calmly spoken, I repeated, I never wanted them. Indeed, all recognized Chu Ky tangled with his terminal ex-girlfriend, all mocked my position. So breaking divorce news to my family, my aunt airily responded. Fear not, in your class, remarrying holds value. Dryly, I laughed, I'm valueless, don't dream. The On company you claim, my father's possessions are yours now. If you don't want scandal, On family pushing their elder daughter to death, then leave me in peace. Aunt's usually serene, deep eyes darkened with hatred. Perhaps retaliating, she sneered softly. Don't blame yourself, should your husband, choosing death with another, sadden you. Love's dissolution, my expectations of Chu Ky gone, couldn't anymore impact me. Sharing with Yuan. Anyway, should Chu Ky ask, don't mention my whereabouts. On you lack nothing. Indeed, Chu Ky, I'm destitute save a living body. Learning from Yuan after my departure, he confirmed Chu Ky's return. Solitary, unaccompanied by To-Do perhaps, she lingered no longer, though dying at Erhai was her living wish. His numerous calls, queried messages, what do you mean? Are you divorcing me? I responded none. Nor was it needed. According to Yuan, Chu Ky became gravely desperate upon realizing my absence, launching a search, storming the On household. Father and aunt's discussion midway captured his intrusion, plotting forcibly retrieving me for matchmaking to a 50-year-old widower with vast influence. On behold Chu Ky's expression, truly spectacular. On his phone, Yuan reminisced, plus, remember your police report? They contacted the house, stating no contact with you but assuring 2 suspects failed in their assault were apprehended. Subsequent snippets emerged through Yuan. Desperate, Chu Ky sought the police station, hearing our clashes had concluded with much underlying panic. Suddenly, he collapsed, sobbing unrestrained on the curb outside. Accompanying him, Yuan noticed his bloodshot gaze turned beseechingly. Truly, don't you know where On is? I don't. Shrugging, Yuan dismissed it, indeed you know, On stubborn, no warmth up, known only you've peered within. Momentarily, Chu Ky shattered. Determined, he investigated everything I endured over time. 3 years abroad, uncovering old tribulations. With each revelation came greater disillusionment. I know he repentantly regretted his words. But spilt water can't be retrieved. Hearing Chu Ky deeply troubled caused no ease, only vast, indifferent emptiness within. Beyond past ordeals and current reflection, I avoid significant upheaval wherever possible. I've lived, a ghost of flesh, only Chu Ky emotions momentarily from darkened confines, finding ephemeral hope. Now forfeited. On sharing possibility of a school reunion event, Yuan mentioned issuance of invitations for distinguished alumni. Ours, arriving at Chu Ky's. He returned visiting teachers, to my former homeroom who mused, so many years, yet with on to, your marriage, really rare, hardly any young couples last. Stunned, there he stood, hearing each remembrance. Each recollection of the past, lovingly conspired but enshrined in unknown corners. Certainly, he recalls years past, his care toward you, even when drinking celebrate graduation, rambling future marriage with on to. Yuan paused. So I told him, stop pretending. 3 years away, you've never flown to visit, tangled into do. Especially given she's forfeited hope. Intelligent, Chu Ky nonetheless deduced our retained contact, persuading Yuan into yielding my location. This afternoon, holding a pharmacy bag, I noticed Chu Ky loitering near the door. At seeing me, reddened eyes welled, Atu. Are you ill, aren't you? No, I'm healthy. I said, just refilling my long-term medications temporary, risk-free, surely no incurable cancer. Passing him towards my courtyard, his hand clutched my sleeve, imploring, Atu, I don't wish for divorce. How ludicrous. My love for him hadn't evaporated suddenly, but worn away slowly through countless prior choices, retreating to Tadu's side, until nothing remained. Now, with her gone, does he wish for what? Blandly, I suggested, should you miss Tadu, you might join her. I don't long for her. Suddenly, his volume raised, only to lower, hoarse. I merely stated, she was dying. I stayed for atonement only. I've lost count of times he reiterated Tadu's dying condition. As if in facing death, the world was meant to abstain for her, stepping aside. Finally, I laughed aloud, for what special reason? Isn't it just cancer leukemia? Many faced the struggle, not her alone. For years, I'd cut, self-burn, overdosed, yet each time revived. Unlike her. I envied when she declared her time short, facing you in tears. It inspired me to wish the swap. Let me die, her live, happy with you. Everyone wins. Pain and despair, intensity etched across his eyes, matched disbelief. Atu, I didn't know. Had I? The next words never spoken. He had forfeited the right. Evidently guilty, the anguish he unfairly portrayed maligned me unjustly. Even now, I felt no heartbreak or tumult within. People change, Chu Ky. While at 20 you swore fidelity, at 21 you wavered, I didn't fault you. Truly, deeply I loved you, so long did emotions ripple for only you, even when you dismissed me and fled to Tadu, I didn't begrudge. But you exhausted my affection. Whether you, Tadu, or that deranged admirer, reasoning is unchanged, for I had everything, seemingly fulfilled you with setbacks, unrelinquished passion. Yet I renounce everything, now empty-handed, why persist punishing me? Finally, Chu Ky faded from my world. News sporadically surfaced from Yuan. Like the unexpected demise of those imprisoned attackers. Or the Chu family's relentless vendetta against the On enterprise, even at ruinous, record-breaking cost, obstructing their contracts. Ultimately the On crumbled, leaving Chu holdings halved. The golden chain steadfastly enslaving me crumbled, then disappeared. Hearing this, I found brief stupefaction before visiting a nearby shop, purchasing an inexpensive bottle of spirits. Endless purging rendered my stomach sensitive, intolerant to liquor's bite. Bars, I ordered only a drink for show. But rare happy moments deserving recognition. 2 swallows, my gut revolted, returning it aside. Abruptly, the phone rang. I answered reluctantly. Chu Ky's voice slurred across. Atu, I avenged you. Briefly, it seemed he drew me back to 14. Bullies he chased away transformed his bruised face to mine. I avenged you, hating them, Atu. Thus, affection bloomed. But reality encroached swiftly. All right, hanging up. Any calm nerves vanished. Don't, Two, I just want to hear you a bit. Grinning, I replied, paid respects to do lately? Speech failed, accelerating breaths laden with abject fear. Oh, forgot to mention, the night you left for to do, she friended me. So wherever your travels took you since, I saw clearly. Chu Ky, for all you've done after, gratitude escaped me. You remain unworthy. Gentle winds caressed beneath sultry moonlight. Silence held until finally, broken lending a sobbing breath. You're right, utterly unworthy. Two, everything's my fault. Punishment's owed, but you, please, stay healthy. Cutting the call left matters thusly. 2 days ago, at follow-up, the psychiatrist noted emotional improvement gleaming across me. Perhaps liberated, unburdened of crushing chains, life regained buoyancy, I considered lingering. Lastly consigning my last vivid dream of adolescent years with Chu Ky. Emptying the bottle into a trash bin, I departed the terrace. Tonight, I'd sleep early, greeted waking dawn on the shore at sunrise. Rising beneath assuredly brightening light alongside crashing waves, I drew strength, contemplating worlds anew.